The sound of alien chittering echoed through the metallic corridors of the Federation base on Daver Prime, a lush, green planet orbiting two suns. It was a meeting of extraordinary importance, or so the Interstellar Council had declared. Beings of all shapes, sizes, and atmospheres had gathered, their translucent and opaque forms filling the massive chamber. At the head of the room, under the opalescent glow of a floating orb, stood Captain Haley Nolan, the first human to represent Earth in such an assembly. Her stance was casual, almost too casual for the solemn atmosphere. She adjusted her navy blue uniform, a small Earth flag patch on her shoulders standing out among the more elaborate insignias of other species. Haley glanced around the room and sighed audibly. "Let me get this straight," she began, her voice cutting through the ambient hum like a shard of ice. "You're telling me that the galaxy's most advanced coalition, which has solved problems as vast as terraforming stars and creating sentient ecosystems, cannot handle, what was it again? A temperamental trading dispute?" The audience of dignitaries shifted uneasily, their alien pride stung. The matter at hand was indeed serious. A rogue faction of the Zorvans, known for their brutal efficiency and unpredictable aggression, had taken control of key trade routes in the sector. Supplies critical to life on dozens of planets were dwindling, and the Council's attempts at diplomacy had only escalated hostilities. The Zorvans, however, were equally infamous for never engaging in violence with humans. A phenomenon no one fully understood, least of all the humans themselves. Nyarvis, a feline-like diplomat with shimmering silver fur, stepped forward. "Captain Nolan, the situation demands a delicate touch. The Zorvans respect humans, but this respect appears conditional. We cannot risk triggering whatever has kept them at bay." Haley arched a brow. "Conditional respect? You're acting like we've hypnotized them." The council members exchanged uneasy glances, their alien eyes flickering in their unique ways. Finally, Jiktranos, a crystalline entity whose voice resonated like wind chimes, broke the silence. "Human emotional outbursts, or as you colloquially term it, anger, appears to affect the Zorvans on a deeply instinctual level. However, the specifics remain elusive." Haley's jaw dropped slightly. "Wait, are you telling me that they're scared of us when we're mad?" "Yes," Nyarvis replied, her tail flicking nervously. "That's ridiculous. You've all got fleets and advanced tech, why would anger scare anyone?" Haley smirked, though there was a glint of curiosity in her eyes. "Well, unless..." Jiktranos' crystal facets shimmered darkly. "There is a legend among the Zorvans, a warning passed down from the first contact between their kind and humanity. They call it the Red Storm. It is said that to witness a human in true wrath is to glimpse annihilation." Haley barked a laugh before quickly stifling it. "Sorry. Continue." Another alien spoke up, its gelatinous form shifting hues. "We do not understand how or why, but every encounter where humans have displayed significant emotional turbulence has led to abrupt Zorvan retreats." Haley rubbed her temples. "So, what, you want me to play the bad cop? Yell a bit, scare them off?" Nyarvis gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Precisely." Haley sighed. "This just keeps getting better." Moments later, Haley found herself aboard the Council's flagship, headed toward the Zorvan stronghold. She was flanked by an imposing team of elite aliens, all clad in ceremonial armor. Despite their technological superiority, Haley could see the unease in their movements. Her only comfort was that humans had earned a reputation strong enough to merit being the Council's last-ditch effort. "Captain," a voice chimed in through her earpiece. It was Lieutenant Kai Green, her communication officer back on the Earth outpost. "We've picked up chatter from the Zorvans. Their leader, High Commander Zal, is personally overseeing operations." Haley's expression hardened. "Any idea what he wants? Besides complete dominance of the trade networks?" Kai's voice was tinged with sarcasm. "Not much. But be careful, Haley. The Zorvans aren't known for second chances." As the ship entered the atmosphere of the Zorvan base, Haley watched the alien structure loom ahead, a sprawling fortress of dark, organic materials, pulsing faintly as if alive. The closer they got, the heavier the atmosphere felt. It wasn't just the thick fog or the gravity, it was the collective tension of everyone on board. When they landed, Haley stepped off the ship and was immediately met by Zal himself. Towering, insectoid, and encased in sharp, jagged armor, he exuded an aura of menace. The Zorvan soldiers behind him hissed and clicked their mandibles, creating an unsettling cacophony. "You must be the human envoy," Zal said, his voice guttural and laced with disdain. "Why has the council sent you here? Another futile negotiation?" Haley held her ground, her face neutral but her mind racing. "I'm here because you've been causing trouble, and I'm here to stop it." Zal's antennae twitched. "Stop it?" Bold words for a fragile creature. "Do you think your presence alone will deter us?" Haley crossed her arms, her voice dangerously calm. "You tell me, Zal. What happens when humans get upset?" There was a noticeable shift in Zal's posture, a flicker of hesitation in his predatory eyes. Behind him, some of the soldiers exchanged uncertain glances. Haley smirked, sensing an opportunity. "You've heard the stories, haven't you? About what happens when we lose our temper." For a moment, Zal's bravado faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Legends. Superstitions. We Zorvans are not afraid of you." Haley's smile disappeared. She took a single step forward, her voice dropping to a low, dangerous tone. "Then maybe it's time you learned." The Zorvan soldiers took an involuntary step back. Haley could feel the weight of their fear hanging in the air. But Zal remained defiant. "You cannot frighten me with tales," he growled. "This is our domain, and you are outnumbered." Haley's eyes narrowed. "Then let's find out just how fragile we are." She clenched her fists, her heart pounding as she prepared for the next move. The Zorvans had no idea what they'd just awakened. The Zorvan fortress trembled under the weight of its own uneasy silence. Haley stood her ground, eyes locked on High Commander Zal. The alien leader's mandibles clicked rhythmically, an alien gesture that might have been a mixture of defiance and unease. Behind him, the Zorvan soldiers shifted nervously, the once impenetrable wall of warriors now rippling with uncertainty. "You think bravado alone will save your kind?" Zal hissed, his voice like gravel grinding underfoot. "The Council's faith in your species is misplaced. We are the Zorvans, conquerors, unmatched in the galaxy." Haley didn't flinch. Instead, she took another deliberate step forward. "You're right about one thing," she said evenly. "We don't come in peace when we're pushed too far. And you're pushing." The tension was palpable. Haley wasn't just betting on Zorvan superstition, she was counting on the fear that legends had instilled. Still, she couldn't help but feel a pang of uncertainty. Would this gambit work, or had the stories exaggerated the Zorvan reaction to humanity's wrath? Zal's laugh echoed through the hall, sharp and discordant. "Your threats are meaningless. Humans are ants under our boots. It's time we crushed one." Haley's jaw clenched, and for a moment, she considered taking the bait. But she had another idea. Turning her back to Zal, a calculated risk, she gazed up at the towering figures of the Zorvan soldiers. "Do you all believe him?" she called out, her voice ringing through the hall. "Do you think I'm just here to talk? Or have you heard the same stories I have?" Several Zorvans exchanged nervous glances. A few stepped back, their claws twitching. Zal snarled, his patience fraying. "Enough! Humans do not intimidate us. Guards, prepare to..." "Quiet!" Haley snapped, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. To her own surprise, even Zal froze. She turned back to him, her gaze sharp and unyielding. "You don't get it, do you, Zal?" she continued. "When humans fight, we don't stop. You can break our ships, blockade our worlds, and slaughter our people, but you'll never win. Because there's one thing you'll never match, our fury." Her voice carried a fire that even she didn't realize she could summon. The Zorvans shrank back, their carapaces clicking nervously. Zal, however, straightened, his posture stiff with defiance. "Fury? Is that what you call this performance? He sneered. Let us test your fire, human. Zal raised his arm, and a sudden vibration coursed through the floor. The fortress seemed to come alive as barriers rose, sealing the chamber from escape. The once distant hum of machinery grew into a deafening roar, and a faint red glow bathed the walls. You wanted to show me your fury? Zal bellowed. Let us see it, then. Haley's pulse quickened as two hulking war machines emerged from the shadows, their exoskeletons glistening with alien alloys. Each stood twice her height, their limbs bristling with weaponry that hummed ominously. Is this your idea of courage? Haley shouted, her voice unwavering despite the odds. Hiding behind machines? Zal ignored her, his mandibles clicking in what she assumed was a smug grin. Fury alone will not save you, Captain Nolan. It seems your legend ends here. The war machines lumbered forward, their steps rattling the chamber. Haley's mind raced. She wasn't a soldier, Earth's diplomatic efforts had never focused on brute strength. But she had something the Zorvans didn't, resourcefulness. She glanced around the chamber, her eyes landing on the glowing consoles embedded in the walls. If the Zorvans relied so heavily on technology, perhaps their strength could also be their weakness. The machines were closing in. Haley sidestepped their lumbering movements, her breath steady despite her pounding heart. One of the mechanical monstrosities lunged, a blade-like appendage slicing through the air where she had just been standing. Haley rolled to her feet, scrambling toward one of the consoles. The nearest Zorvan soldier stepped forward to intercept, but she glared at him with a fury that stopped him in his tracks. Touch me, and you'll find out why your people fear us. The alien hesitated, visibly unnerved. Haley seized the moment, slamming her hand against the console and studying the alien symbols flashing across the screen. They were indecipherable, but the logic of their layout reminded her of Earth's technology. Desperation sharpened her instincts. The war machines recalibrated, their movements accelerating. One raised a cannon-like appendage, and Haley dove behind a pillar as it fired, the energy blast scorching the air. The pillar shuddered but held. Get her! Zal roared, his composure slipping. Haley's fingers danced across the console. She was guessing, but it was a calculated guess. With a final swipe, she triggered something, a loud hiss filled the room as the red glow intensified. What are you doing? Zal demanded, his antennae twitching. Haley grinned, adrenaline flooding her veins. Didn't your text tell you? Humans are unpredictable. The chamber quaked as vents along the walls burst open, releasing plumes of steam. The war machines faltered, their systems thrown into chaos. Sparks flew from their joints as the steam corroded their intricate mechanisms. Zal's mandibles clicked furiously. You dare sabotage our stronghold? Haley stepped forward, her confidence returning. This isn't sabotage, it's a warning. The Zorvan soldiers were retreating now, their fear palpable. Even Zal's bravado was faltering as the war machines collapsed in smoldering heaps. You wanted to see fury? Haley shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. This is just the beginning. Push humans too far, and we won't just break your machines, we'll break your entire empire. The Zorvans stood frozen, their collective fear almost tangible. Haley locked eyes with Zal, her glare unwavering. Call off the blockade, or the stories your people tell will become reality. For the first time, Zal hesitated. His defiance cracked, and beneath it, Haley saw what the Council had known all along, the fear that humans inspired when provoked. You have until sundown to decide, she said, her voice low and deadly. Then she turned, walking away with a confidence that left the Zorvans stunned. The Zorvan stronghold seethed with tension as Captain Haley Nolan walked away from the broken war machines, the hiss of escaping steam punctuating the silence. Her pulse raced, adrenaline surging through her as she left the wreckage behind. She couldn't look back now, to do so would undermine the aura of invincibility she'd worked so hard to project. But inside, her thoughts churned. She had bought herself time, nothing more. Back aboard the Council's flagship, Haley stood in the dimly lit command center, a holographic map of the Zorvan-controlled trade routes rotating in midair. The Federation counselors had gathered once more, their expressions ranging from worry to outright panic. Nyarvis, her feline-like counterpart, paced on all fours, her tail lashing in agitation. "This is madness," Nyarvis growled. "You've antagonized Zal even further. We should have sent a fleet, not one human with a penchant for theatrics." Haley smirked, though her mind was already working through contingencies. Zal doesn't fear fleets. He knows how to deal with those. What he doesn't know is how to deal with us. You're gambling with galactic stability. Nyarvis snapped. "Gambling is what humans do best," Haley countered, leaning over the holographic map. "And if we're lucky, the pot just got big enough to force Zal to fold." Jik Tranos, the crystalline diplomat, interjected, his resonant voice calming the rising tension. "Captain Nolan, do you believe Zal will negotiate? Or will he escalate?" Haley sighed, running a hand through her hair. "If we know one thing about bullies like Zal, it's that they can't afford to lose face. He'll push back. Hard." Jik Tranos nodded solemnly. "Then we must prepare for retaliation." As if on cue, an alert blared through the command center. A technician hurriedly brought up a display, revealing a fleet of Zorvan warships mobilizing in orbit above the planet. Haley stared at the screen, her jaw tightening. That's not just retaliation. That's an invasion force. Zal watched the preparations from the bridge of his flagship, his mandibles twitching in barely contained rage. The human's insolence had humiliated him in front of his own soldiers, and his honor demanded retribution. But beneath the anger, a seed of doubt gnawed at him. He replayed Haley's words in his mind, "Push humans too far, and we won't just break your machines, we'll break your entire empire." What did she mean by that? The Zorvans had conquered countless civilizations, some far more advanced than humanity. Yet no other species had ever wielded anger as a weapon the way humans did. It was unsettling. "Commander," one of his officers interrupted, snapping Zal out of his thoughts. "The fleet is ready. Shall we initiate the blockade?" "No," Zal growled, his voice colder than the void. "We will not blockade. We will crush them outright. Deploy the shock troops." The officer hesitated. "High Commander," with respect, the human spoke of their fury. "Should we not?" "Do not speak of that nonsense." Zal snapped, his claws slicing through the air. "Their fury is nothing but myth. Let this human face the full might of the Zorvan Empire." As the officer bowed and scurried off, Zal turned back to the viewport, staring into the stars. Still, the seed of doubt remained. On the Council's flagship, alarms blared as Zorvan warships closed in on Daver Prime. Haley stood at the command console, her mind racing. This was beyond her original plan. She had expected posturing, perhaps a single skirmish to save face. But Zal had gone all in, and now the stakes were higher than ever. "What's our fleet's status?" she asked, keeping her voice calm despite the tension crackling through the room. "Limited," Kai Green's voice came through the comms. "Most of the Federation ships are tied up elsewhere. We've got a handful of cruisers and a couple of orbital platforms. It's not enough." Haley clenched her fists. "Then we make do. Prepare all defensive systems and put out a call for reinforcements." Kai hesitated. "Captain, reinforcements won't get here in time." Haley didn't respond immediately. Instead, she stared at the holographic map, watching as the Zorvan fleet moved with precision, tightening its hold on the planet like a noose. There had to be a way to turn this around. Her eyes darted to the section of the map where the Zorvan stronghold was located. "Nyarvis, what's the status of their ground forces?" The feline diplomat's ears flattened. "Most of their troops are planetside, but their fleet can deploy reinforcements at will." "Why?" Haley's gaze hardened. "Because Zal's overconfidence is his greatest weakness. He's put everything into the show of strength, and that means there's no backup plan." Jik Tranos tilted his crystalline head. "What are you suggesting, Captain?" "We take out their command structure. We go after Zal himself." The room erupted into protests. Jarvis hissed, "That's suicide. He'll have the entire base fortified." "Exactly," Haley said, a small, determined smile forming. "He won't expect us to strike in the middle of an invasion. He thinks we'll hide, that we'll wait for help. But humans don't wait." Jarvis looked like she was about to argue further, but Jick Tranos raised a shimmering hand. "Captain Nolan, if this is your plan, then you will need the Council's full support." Haley nodded. "I'm counting on it." The Zorvan stronghold was a hive of activity, its corridors swarming with soldiers preparing for war. Amidst the chaos, a small, cloaked shuttle slipped past the outer defenses, cloaked in the electromagnetic haze of the planet's atmosphere. Haley sat in the cockpit, her grip firm on the controls. Beside her, Jarvis crouched, her fur bristling with nervous energy. Jick Tranos' crystalline form glimmered faintly in the dim light. Despite their objections, they had agreed to accompany her. Haley hadn't expected anything less. The shuttle touched down near an auxiliary entrance, hidden from the main thoroughfares. Haley checked her weapon, a compact plasma pistol, and turned to her companions. "Once we're inside, we split up. Jarvis, you disable their communications. Jick Tranos, you create a diversion in the lower levels. I'll take the direct route to Zal." Jarvis' eyes narrowed. "You're walking into the lion's den alone?" Haley smirked. "Wouldn't be the first time." The trio moved swiftly, slipping through the shadows of the fortress. The alien architecture loomed around them, pulsing faintly as if alive. Haley's heart pounded in her chest, but she kept her focus sharp. Every step brought her closer to the heart of Zal's command. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of impending conflict. The Zorvans had underestimated humanity once. This time, they wouldn't live to regret it. The hallways of the Zorvan stronghold echoed with the faint hum of alien machinery. Captain Haley Nolan advanced carefully, her plasma pistol drawn and her senses sharp. She could hear distant clatters and alien voices growing louder as she approached the command center. The stakes were painfully clear. If this mission failed, the Zorvan fleet would raise the planet and humanity's fragile standing in the galaxy would crumble. Behind her, the echoes of Jick Tranos' diversion rumbled through the lower levels of the fortress. The crystalline diplomat had caused enough chaos to divert a significant portion of Zorvan forces. Meanwhile, Jarvis' expertise in sabotage had silenced their communications, throwing their coordination into disarray. But it wouldn't last. Haley knew she was running out of time. The door to the command center loomed ahead, flanked by 2 Zorvan guards. They were monstrous, their jagged exoskeletons glinting under the harsh, pulsing lights. Haley ducked into the shadows, assessing her options. Direct confrontation wasn't ideal, she was outmatched in strength and numbers. But there was always another way. Spotting a ventilation shaft to her left, she quietly removed the grate and slipped inside, the narrow passage barely accommodating her frame. Crawling forward, she reached the other side of the chamber and peered through another grate, now directly overlooking the command center. High Commander Zal stood at the center of the room, his commanding presence casting a long shadow over the control panels and holographic maps. "Status report." Zal barked, his mandibles twitching angrily. "Why are our communications offline? And what in the void is happening in the lower levels?" A Zorvan officer scrambled to respond, his clicks and hisses betraying his fear. "High Commander, there are reports of sabotage and intruders, but we have yet to." "Enough!" Zal roared. "I will not have this stronghold disgraced further. Deploy every remaining unit to eliminate the threat." Haley's grip tightened on her pistol. This was her moment. She pushed the grate aside, letting it clatter to the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber, silencing every Zorvan present. "Looking for me?" Haley said, stepping out of the shadows, her weapon trained on Zal. Her voice carried a calm she didn't entirely feel. The room erupted into chaos. The Zorvan guards surged forward, but Zal raised a claw, halting them. He turned slowly to face her, his eyes narrowing. "You have guts, human," Zal hissed, his voice low and menacing. "But this is where your defiance ends." Haley smirked, keeping her weapon steady. Funny. I was about to say the same thing. Before Zal could respond, Haley fired, the plasma shot streaking across the room and striking the console nearest to him. Sparks erupted, the lights flickered, and the holographic displays distorted into chaos. The Zorvan guards charged, but Haley was already moving, vaulting over a railing to put distance between herself and her pursuers. Blaster fire erupted around her as the guards opened fire, their shots scorching the air. Haley ducked and rolled, returning fire with precision. 2 of the guards fell, their exoskeletons cracking under the impact. Zal roared in fury, slamming his claws against the ground and sending a shockwave rippling through the room. Haley barely managed to keep her footing. She fired again, this time at the ceiling supports above Zal. The plasma shot destabilized the structure, causing a section of the ceiling to collapse. Zal leapt backward with a hiss, narrowly avoiding the falling debris. You cannot win, human. Zal snarled, his voice echoing. Your species is weak, driven by emotions that cloud your judgment. Haley ducked behind a console, reloading her pistol. Weak, she called out, her voice steady despite the chaos. Funny, coming from someone whose entire army is scared of a little human anger. Zal froze for a fraction of a second, just long enough for Haley to notice. His bravado was cracking. You've read the stories, haven't you, Zal? Haley continued, stepping out from her cover. She walked toward him, her weapon lowered but her confidence growing. The ones about what happens when humans are pushed too far. Let me tell you something about us. You can break our bones, destroy our cities, even take our lives. But you will never break our spirit. Zal's mandibles clicked nervously. Your words mean nothing. Then let's make this simple, Haley said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. Call off the fleet. Stand down, or I'll show you exactly what those stories are about. For a moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to cut with a blade. Zal stared at her, his alien features betraying a mixture of rage and fear. Then, with a guttural snarl, he lunged. Haley sidestepped at the last moment, narrowly avoiding his claws. She spun, delivering a sharp kick to the back of his knee, sending him sprawling. Before he could recover, she pressed the muzzle of her pistol against his head. Call off the fleet, she said, her voice ice-cold. Zal hesitated, his pride warring with his survival instincts. Around them, the remaining Zorvan guards watched in stunned silence. Finally, with a low growl, Zal raised a claw to his comm device. All units, stand down, he hissed, his voice dripping with humiliation. The invasion is cancelled. Haley stepped back, her pistol still trained on him. The tension in the room eased slightly as the Zorvan guards lowered their weapons. But Haley wasn't done. Good choice, she said, her tone lighter but still firm. And just so we're clear, if you ever try something like this again, we won't just destroy your fleet, we'll destroy everything you stand for. Understood? Zal glared at her, but he nodded. Understood. Haley lowered her weapon, her heart still pounding. She turned to the guards, who parted to let her pass. As she walked out of the command center, she felt the weight of what had just happened settle over her. She had gambled everything on human determination, and she had won. Back aboard the council flagship, Haley stood before the assembled counselors. The tension had evaporated, replaced by a palpable sense of relief. You did it, Nyarvis said, her tail flicking with admiration. You stopped the invasion. Haley shrugged, a wry smile on her lips. It wasn't just me. It was the stories. Sometimes, the scariest thing in the galaxy isn't the biggest fleet or the strongest weapon. Sometimes, it's a species that refuses to back down. Jik Trenos chimed in, his crystalline tones resonating with approval. Captain Nolan, your courage has secured not just peace, but a new level of respect for humanity. Haley nodded, exhaustion finally creeping in. Let's just hope Zal remembers that next time. As she stepped away from the council chamber, the faintest smile crossed her face. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of when pushed to their limits. And Haley had a feeling they'd never forget it. The council chamber was quiet, save for the hum of holographic displays projecting images of the aftermath on Daver Prime. The Zorvan fleet had retreated, their warships disappearing into the void one by one. On the planet below, the scattered remnants of their ground forces were surrendering or fleeing. The Federation's defense platforms were intact, and the trade routes, once paralyzed by Zorvan blockades, had begun to reopen. Captain Haley Nolan leaned against a railing, watching the projections with tired but satisfied eyes. Her uniform was scuffed and singed, a testament to the chaos she'd endured over the past days. The mission had been a success, but the weight of what had almost happened still lingered. "Captain," Lieutenant Kai Green's voice broke through the comms. "Incoming message from the Zorvan High Council. Looks like they're scrambling to distance themselves from Zal's actions." Haley smirked. "I bet they are. Put it through to the council chamber. Let's see how they spin this." As she entered the chamber, the alien diplomats of the Interstellar Council turned their attention to her. The projection of a Zorvan elder flickered into view, his mandibles clicking in a tone that sounded almost conciliatory. "Federation Council," the elder began, "the actions of High Commander Zal were unsanctioned. He will be stripped of his command and face internal consequences. The Zorvan people wish to reaffirm our commitment to galactic stability." Haley folded her arms, letting the counselors do the talking. She wasn't about to let the Zorvans off the hook so easily, but diplomacy required a lighter touch than the one she had used with Zal. Still, she couldn't resist interjecting. "And the blockade?" she asked, her tone firm but calm. The elder hesitated before replying. "It will be dismantled immediately. Zorvan forces are already withdrawing." "Good," Haley said, her expression neutral. "Let's hope this is the last time we have this kind of conversation." The elder inclined his head slightly, and the projection faded. As the counselors erupted into discussion, Nyarvis approached Haley, her silver fur shimmering under the chamber's lights. "I still can't believe it," Nyarvis admitted, her tail flicking thoughtfully. "You didn't just stop the Zorvans, you forced them to back down. You've done what no fleet ever could." Haley shrugged. "Sometimes it's not about the size of the fleet. Sometimes it's about reminding people, aliens, in this case, what's at stake." Nyarvis narrowed her feline eyes. "And what exactly is at stake for humans?" Haley's expression softened. "Our future. Our place in the galaxy. And making sure no one mistakes our kindness for weakness." Jictranos joined them, his crystalline form radiating soft light. "Captain Nolan, your actions will be remembered. Not just by us, but by every species that hears of this. You have shown the galaxy what it means to be human." Haley chuckled softly. "Let's just hope the galaxy can handle it." Later, as the flagship departed Daver Prime's orbit, Haley found herself staring out of a viewport at the vast expanse of space. The stars seemed brighter now, the darkness less intimidating. Humanity had taken a risk by joining the galactic community, and today, that risk had paid off. Her comms buzzed again, and Kai's voice came through. "Captain, there's a message from Earth Command. They're requesting a full debrief." "Of course they are," Haley muttered. "Patch it through." Kai hesitated. "And, Captain, they've also requested a personal comment. Seems like the council's been singing your praises." Haley rolled her eyes, though a faint smile tugged at her lips. "Tell Earth Command that I'll give them a comment once I've had a solid 8 hours of sleep." Kai laughed. "Roger that, Captain." Haley turned off the comms and leaned back in her chair. The galaxy didn't know fear until humans had lost their temper, and today, it had learned just how far that temper could go. But beneath the bravado and the fury, Haley knew the truth: humanity's greatest strength wasn't anger. It was resilience. The ability to stand tall in the face of impossible odds, to fight not for power or dominance, but for the simple, profound belief that survival meant more than just existing, it meant thriving. As the flagship's engines roared to life, Haley closed her eyes, letting the hum of the ship lull her into a rare moment of peace. The battle was over, but the journey had just begun. Humanity had earned its place among the stars, and Haley was ready to see where that path would lead next. And with that, the story concludes, capturing both the tenacity and the humanity that defined the mission and left an indelible mark on the galaxy.